Okay, so we finally got what's probably the most exciting Bleach game to come to the platform for a while now. Like the title says, the game is supposed to release today as you're watching this video, or maybe it's already released by the time you're watching it. Now, the game does do a lot of things really well, such as the transformations being probably the coolest on the entire Roblox platform. It has really good combat and good visuals overall, but with that being said, there are still a lot of bad things in the game, in my opinion, that need to be addressed, and just a lot of problems with the game that I feel like should not be there. And for everybody that was about to comment, game name, listen, I hear you, the game name is Paradox. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have already heard of Paradox, but I feel like no one has really done a good job at actually describing the game you're getting. So in this video, I'm really going to explain if the game is something that's worth playing and something that specifically for you is worth playing. Yes, I'm talking about you. I'm literally pointing at you through the screen. Oh, and by the way, I plan on having a beginner's guide on the game today and possibly other guides as well, so make sure to subscribe so you don't actually miss that, because it's going to be pretty useful. Okay, I'm going to be so real. It also boosts the algorithm, you know what I'm saying? Help a brother out. But as you guys know, Paradox is a Bleach game. Now, they actually only had a Ronkar and Soul Reaper until recently they just added Quincy. Now, I know what some of you guys are probably thinking. How about Fullbringer? I'm sorry, bro. Peroxide is like the only game that's ever going to have Fullbringer at this rate. I'm going to be so serious with you. For whatever reason, no game really wants to add Fullbringer. I do get it definitely is the least significant of the races, but I don't know, it just gets no love ever. But first, I want to talk about what's one of the most important things in these type of RPG games, and that's the actual progression. But if you've played damn near any Roblox Bleach game literally ever, you probably know how most of the progression goes for Hollow and Soul Reaper, and even for Quincy, to be honest. For most Bleach games on the platform, for Quincy and Soul Reaper, you're just going to be doing like a quest board over and over again until you get to your Shikai or your Shrift, and then from there it will actually pick up and get a lot more exciting. And this usually happens because the PvP is usually not that interesting until you get your actual power, and it also just allows you to actually be able to play the PvP combat without getting literally shit on by, you know, a million different max level players. And I feel like we all know how Hollow progression goes in these types of games. It's damn near the same thing every time. It's usually a long and tedious grind that's harder than the other ones just because you decided you want to go Hollow, and you're gonna have to go through all the stages of Fishbone, Menos, Ajukis, Vasto Lorde, and then Vasto Car. Or you could just go early and become a Menos car with that big ass nose. But let's be for real, no one doing that. But that leaves us with the question of, does Paradox actually innovate on these things at all? Is it the same exact thing, or what do they actually do here? And although you can tell this game had a ton of effort being put into it just based on the visuals and the UI, etc., the game for the most part has the same flaws as every other Roblox Bleach game. Well, at least in terms of progression. I will say though, I'm mostly speaking on the Hollow side of things. I did play Soul Reaper and Quincy a little bit, but not enough to really speak on it fully. So I am going off a little bit of what I've heard, not what I've actually experienced for those side of things. But let's start with Hollow progression, since it's the one I actually did. In Hollow progression, it's basically just like I explained earlier, but to be fair, it's not as tedious as a lot of other games I've played. Like for example, in Type Soul, you eventually become a white Ajukis after a million years, and then you can lose it if you die to another white Ajukis and have to like restart, or you have to go do this like puzzle like maze thing with these whispers in your ears. Basically what I'm trying to say is that is actually trash, and this game is infinitely more convenient than that and infinitely easier in my opinion. I think it took me like an hour to get from Fishbone to Vasto, and I think it's since been changed. I believe it might be easier, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, I gave them way too much credit here. I'm not gonna lie, I just checked the recording. I think it was more like 3 hours or so. I'm not 100% sure because I did pause the recording midway, but it seems about that range. But like I said, I think it's been shortened since. So overall for Hollow progression, they didn't make any unnecessary tedious things in terms of actually becoming a Vasto car. It's pretty much the normal beat up Hollows, then go beat up other Hollows, then wait for a little bit, then beat up a lot of more Hollows, and then you're basically done. Now for Soul Reaper and Quincy, like I said, I haven't experienced it too much myself, but from my understanding, it's pretty much the same thing as Hollow, except you start as basically a Ronkar. Like once you hit a Ronkar, you basically just start doing what Soul Reapers and Quincy's are doing. And that's the quest board of doom. Arguably the best part of any Bleach game. For whatever reason, every Bleach game at this point has to have the quest board of doom. Like I understand having quest boards, like it's not the worst thing in the world, but at the same time, I do feel like there's infinitely more interesting ways they can make progression than revolving it around a quest board. And all of the quests are pretty easy, to be honest, at least all of the ones I did. You're just gonna do them, repeat them, do them until you actually get to the point where you actually reach your full potential. And then once you do that, you're gonna battle Kisuke, very similar to like Peroxide if you guys have played that. And you're basically just gonna be doing this for a while until you actually go to get your Resurrection or Volt Standing or Shika. Now I'm not gonna lie, if they did actually improve the progression of this game, I feel like this game would be infinitely more enjoyable for me personally. The combat is actually good. It's definitely not one-to-one with Type Soul or anything, but I do believe it has some inspiration for Type Soul. It's very fast-paced, and I feel like if you do like Type Soul progression, or not Type Soul combat, there's also a very high chance you're gonna like this combat. But there actually is one thing revolving progression that I've never seen in another Bleach game, and that's basically a dungeon system. They also have like a boss raid system where you can fight a bunch of bosses in like a private server with your friends basically. But I mean, other Bleach games have very similar versions of that. But the dungeon system is essentially something very similar to like GPO dungeons. I'll probably put it on the screen. It's essentially a wave simulator. You kill a bunch of NPCs, and at wave 5 and wave 10 you're gonna get a bunch of bosses. They have modifiers that you can use to actually buff the NPCs to get better rewards. And overall, it was a little refreshing to at least see something I haven't seen in another Bleach game. And I actually do want to continue on the positive trend we going on right now and go over some of the other positives. I know a lot of my audience is from Rail C, so if you guys know, Rail C is having a card system, which is basically like buffs. It's also in Deep Oaken, but this one is more like the one in Rail C's. You basically can get a bunch of different cards and you can equip 3 of them at once, and you can actually keep them. You don't like lose them like in Deep Oaken, for example. Like if you don't pick it, it's gone. No, you can get all of them. Now, I genuinely do like the concept they try to go here with the cards. In theory, the cards should encourage build diversity. The cards are also something you can grind for besides, you know, the normal levels and whatnot. So you're probably wondering why I say in theory and not in actual practice, and that's because the execution of this system is kind of bad, at least the last time I played. Like, don't get me wrong, I still do believe it's a net positive overall to have the system, but it's not as good as it really could be if they did decide to actually lock in on it. But let me go over the problems with it. The first thing is the actual obtainment of these cards. Now, they miss a really good opportunity here to make these cards drop from bosses, you know, be different unique quests maybe you could do to actually obtain certain cards. And overall, if they made the progression different for certain cards than other cards, maybe they would feel more unique and special. But instead of trying to make some type of cool way to obtain these perks and cards, instead of all of that, you basically just get one singular item, or you like basically just do the normal quest and you're gonna get this item, and you just bring it to an NPC and they just give you a random list of cards and you pick one. And you just do this over and over again until you get all the cards, because it's a guaranteed you're eventually gonna get all the cards. And then when you go to the person, you can't even get anything anymore. At least speaking of last time I played it, maybe they changed it since, but I'm assuming they haven't. Now, at the very least, the system still does encourage some type of build diversity, but to be honest, there's not that many cards in the game, so I really don't think it's that significant. And a lot of the cards, at least last time I played, are just trash, so I mean, you're not going to be using a lot of them anyways. Now, I just realized it might be kind of confusing that I say cards, because there's also like another card system, which is like your main skill tree basically. Like, I assume a lot of you guys have played Type Soul, and you know, you have like Speed, Kendo, Hakuda. In this game, it's basically the same thing, but for whatever reason, you obtain the skills through cards. But the cards you will get will be determined by the amount of stats you have in each thing. So if you have a lot of stats in speed, you're going to get speed related cards, and better speed related cards, the more stats you have, etc. But that's a whole different system than what I was just referring to earlier. So as I said before, Paradox has really good combat in my opinion. It has really good visuals in my opinion, which normally leads to a pretty solid game. And although I do believe this game has a lot of potential, it still really doesn't feel complete in my opinion. And I think the biggest proof of this game is this is a Bleach game releasing without Bankai. There was only Shikai for Soul Reapers. Unless they for some reason added it in last minute to just make me look stupid, but I'm 99% sure it's not in the game. Like I said, Quincy was also just added to the game. And overall, to me, the game does feel enjoyable, but I didn't play the game for nearly as long as I might have, simply because there's not that many things to do, and the content does get repetitive and boring very fast because there's not that much of it. I'm just gonna tell you guys how I see it. I'm gonna crash out, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna tell you how I really feel. And I love the devs of this game, especially Aiden. They're very nice and respectful people, but I personally believe this game should be more of entering an early access phase than fully releasing. Like, I do think the game will do very well on release, and people will be like, yeah, well, that's why they released, because they got all these players. But to be honest, I don't know how many of these players they're gonna retain after a few weeks, simply because there's not that many things to do. And imagine a week or two from now, Type Soul returns with the big update. People are gonna go and play Type Soul again and maybe even forget about the game, which I hope doesn't happen, because this game does have potential, but that's just what I personally believe is a very likely possibility, or at least considerably likely possibility. Also, something I'm just realizing now I forgot to talk about is the boss fights in the game. I'm gonna be real with you guys, the boss fights aren't anything that crazy or that fun. They're not bad by any means. They're pretty good, to be honest, for Roblox standards, but that's not really saying much. The bosses, for the most part, are just normal NPCs that have like their modes. So like for the Arankars, they have their resurrection. So you have like a Stark boss and a Uki Laura boss and a Pantera boss. What's that called? Grimjaw boss. The only real mesh boss that I've seen so far is this boss called Big Blood. And I'm gonna be so real with y'all, this boss is cool the first time you fighting it. After that, it just gets pretty boring. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all, the more I think about this game, the more I think of things that need to be fixed. I'm gonna be so real with y'all. There are only 5 resurrections in the game, so really not a lot of resurrections whatsoever. So you're probably thinking, if there's only 5, right, they're gonna pick the 5 that have the most hype and the most like impact in Bleach, right? And to an extent, you would be correct, because they chose Stark, Uki Laura, and Grimjaw, which are probably the top 3. But the last 2, one of them is a custom-made thing that I don't even know what it's from, to be honest. I'm pretty sure it's just completely custom-made, unless someone can tell me it's from somewhere that I don't know of. And the other resurrection is literally Goku Black, which I don't have a problem with, because I mean, I'm not one of those people that cares, ooh, it's not from Bleach. I don't don't care that much about that sort of stuff. But let's be so for real, why are we adding Dragon Ball characters to the game when we only have 3 canon Arrancar abilities? 3. And I believe there's also a lot of non-canon Shikas in the game, and I really just don't understand why. Maybe they already had the assets from something else and they reused them. If that was the case, I would understand, but I can't really wrap my head around any other reason it would make sense to add these over actual Bleach abilities. Like I said, I would definitely understand later on if they decided to do this, but this early on in development, I feel like it would make way more sense to add, you know, the abilities people are expecting when they play the game. Regardless, assuming the Roblox Curse of Doom doesn't happen, you guys will be playing this game soon, and you guys can tell me what you think. Let me know if I'm right or wrong. But like I probably already said, I will be having a starter guide out when the game does finally release, or probably a little before it releases. And if you are going to play the game, I would definitely recommend watching that, just so you don't have to go through the headache of doing a bunch of dumb stuff, opening up Trellos, looking stuff up. Just watch the guide, bro. I'm gonna be so serious. But we're also like 10 subs away from 53k, and at 53k, we're giving out free feet pics from the big SwiftDFG. I know a lot of you guys probably think you're already subscribed, or you're like, I don't really need to do that, which you don't, but hey, it does a lot for the channel, so I'd appreciate it. If you just want to check if you think you are, I'd appreciate that as well. Thank y'all. Love y'all. Next video soon. Later.